August 23rd, 2019, San Francisco. The Sales Development Conference. The third annual conference focused and dedicated 100% to sales development. Join over 500 of the most influential sales development leaders in our industry for a full day of learning, networking, and growing your skills. This year, we're offering 3 learning tracks focused on sales development leadership, rep training, and our newest track dedicated to sales and marketing operations. Grab your tickets today before it sells out over at tenbound.com/conference. That's tenbound.com/conference. See you August 23rd.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Mastermind with 1.5 masterminds. I got the infamous, the famous Mr. Richard Harris on the phone. How are you doing today, Richard?
I'm good, although I think I'm the half, not the one. So
maybe this is a Sales Development Mastermind. 1/2 of each makes one, but
yeah, I think that's fair. Because you put on this amazing conference. You're doing amazing stuff too. So please, don't put me on a pedestal,
dude. This is going to be awesome. We're stacking up the calls right now.
Great.
This is the Sales Development Call-In Show. So we're gonna whip through this. We're gonna talk to everybody who's on the line right now. Stay on the line if you're listening, because we want to make sure that we get everybody got time and we get some good answers going. But Richard, thanks for joining us. And let's just dive in. Let's start taking some calls.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I got Ashley at 917.
All right.
Ashley at 917. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
It says Ashley, that truck. That can't be right.
What's happening, Ashley?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Are you with like a trucking company?
No, definitely not.
What can we do for you, Ashley? What's your question?
Sure. I just want to know, in your opinion, how do you build trust with prospects?
How do you build trust? That's a great question. First thing I would say is, I read this somewhere, so I can't take credit for this, but the first thing I think we need to do is we need to change our mindset. And I really like this, is that we need to stop treating people like prospects and using that word. Because when we use that word, we're already labeling them as something we want something from, meaning we want something from them more than we want to help them. Right. And so I think we should just call them what they are. They're customers. They may not be paying customers yet, but they're customers. Right. And even if they don't buy now, hopefully the trust we build will allow that. So first thing I think is, change your mindset. Let's not call them prospects. I know the system does, and Salesforce requires it. And, you got your lead flow and marketing. Internally, that's fine. But externally, they're not prospects. They're customers. Right. So that's the first thing is hopefully adjust your mindset. I think the second most important thing is just be direct and honest with them. Right. And from the beginning, and again, Ashley, I might be assuming too much, but maybe it's like at the beginning of the sales cycle. How do we build trust at the beginning? Is that part of your question?
Yeah, pretty much. Like if you're a complete stranger and nobody knows who I am,
right?
Why should they trust?
Yeah, I totally agree. And nor should they, right? So I think you get straight to the point. I do think it also matters on who you're targeting, meaning if you're going after marketing people, you need to understand their mindset, doing some research on the mindset of a marketer. Obviously, if you're working with IT, technical, or developers, they already don't trust us. So they're not, might as well go in acknowledging it. If you're working with sales leaders, they're skeptical. They think they're smarter than you, but they're not. So I think getting straight to the point and just being able to say, hey, Ashley, I know you weren't expecting this call. The reason for my call is X, and we solve these pains. Talk about the pains you solve as it relates to their title more than you talk about what your company does. Right. So nobody gives a shit that Richard Harris is a sales trainer. What they do like to know is that I help teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions. So if I say that to anybody who's thinking about sales training, that hopefully strikes a more significant chord. So talk about the pains you solve before you talk about what you do. I know some reps who love to go in and say, look, hey, Richard, I know you hate getting sales calls, so I'd love to just take 27 seconds to tell you why I call. And if you don't like it, just hang up on me. Like, just be super direct and funny about it a little bit. Tell people they can hang up on you, and guess what's going to happen? They're going to go, well, why would I want to hang up on you? I don't know why you're calling, which again is just back to the first thing I said. Let's change our mindset, but our approach going in should help change their mindset too. Right? When you start with, hi, this is Richard, I'm calling from blah, 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 blah. You've just wasted 9 or 10 or 12 words that we already know is going to just further create a wall of resistance, right? Because they don't care, right? Get to the point. So that's my advice. I don't know if that's what you've tried in the past and it's not working, but I'll certainly take your feedback, Ashley, on if you think that's on the right track. And if not, feel free to disagree. Like, we do not think we're so smart that we know it all.
And with that, Richard, Ashley got terminated. Hopefully, it sounds like a really bad movie from the 80s or something like that. So, right. Ashley, if you're on and you got on the recording, Richard, thanks. That's some great advice. I also wanted to say, I almost feel like we're kind of like the free sample person at Whole Foods. You know, when you walk by and you're trying not to make eye contact. That's kind of how I feel like when we're doing cold calling. Like we are that person. So you can almost study that person. Like, how do they build trust with you? Sometimes you take a free sample and you talk to them for half an hour. Yeah. You know, and just acknowledging the fact, hey, I'm a stranger. You know, being okay with that, being totally honest. And I always tell folks, like, definitely learn as much as you can about the people that you're calling. What's their vocabulary? You know, what, keeps them up at night, for lack of a better thing, and try to lead with some value that you can provide in that conversation versus just, going in with your product. So. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the what keeps you up at night question. I think it's a little old. I think the fresh version of that is, hey, how do you handle this problem? Because we should know what keeps them up at night these days, right? Or just say, hey, are you experiencing this, and would you be open? How open are you to discussing this as a problem you may or may not have, right? But again, if you can make it work, if you can use what keeps you up at night, if that works for you, I'm all for it. Keep going. But I feel like it's been played a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And that for me, it's like, that's how you study when you're not, not necessarily saying like, hey, what keeps you up at night? That's definitely a corny thing. But, when you're studying, it's like, what are the people dealing with that you're actually talking to, and, totally. And how can you lead with like you? I like what you said. It's like, hey, we help your type of person solve this problem, and that's why I'm reaching out, and it's way better than I'm just calling to sell you something.
Yep.
Okay, so Ashley dropped off, and we lost a couple people. Richard, a text just came in. Yep. From Tom Minton. Mm-hmm. And he's asking how the technicality of the product affects the sale. So does a more technical product make for a more difficult sale? And what's the difference for an SDR selling a technical product versus a very simple product? Yeah. So that's an interesting question. Like, where do you start with SDRs when they're either selling something very technical or something more simple?
Yeah, I agree. So I think in either case, you start with the case studies, right? Case studies are designed, in my opinion, to help reduce the technical expertise required to understand what your service helps them accomplish, right? So I say this all the time, like, I would love for people to make memorizing, for lack of a better word, your case studies one of the very first things you have to do in onboarding, almost before you do product knowledge. You need to know what pains you solve, and then you can figure out where the product fits in. Some people are like, well, no, let's just teach them all the product. Well, that's fine, but there's no context. I'd rather try to give them the top context and have people go, okay, I understand the pain we solve, but how do we actually do it? Then the product knowledge comes in. So the more complex your technical service or product is, the more you need stories. People don't buy, in my opinion, the product. They buy the story. They buy the pain resolution, and they buy the pictures in your head, right? So you've got to be able to take the picture that a customer has, translate that into a use case and a case study, and then be able to articulate that back to the prospect and there I go, I just called them a prospect, back to the customer as a story that they can understand, right? So case studies and use cases are super critical in technical products. I think role playing is required. Like, so many people don't want to do role playing. They just want to drop, 2 days of product knowledge and your ICP and then just say, get on the phone. Well, it's like, well, take a third day and make people role play till they throw up, because that's the only way they're ever going to get better. And that third day of training will exponentially pay for itself, rather than just trying to get them on a phone by the end of the first 5 days or whatever the process is. So how do you guys see this, David? Like, what is your approach on that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I love starting with the target market and learning that vocabulary and then learning the case studies on how you specifically solve that. And it's interesting. I guess people are more shy today because we got another text message that just came in that kind of goes along with this. And
Right.
it's more from management side. It says, how often and how many times a week should we be doing training and coaching? What's the difference?
That's a good question. So training for me is the classroom stuff, right? Where you get people together and you do things, and I'm jaded because that's what I do. I do training. Coaching happens after the training. Coaching happens in your one-on-ones. Coaching happens when you're sitting next to your rep and coaching them. If you aren't spending 30 to 40% of your time every week actually coaching people, something's wrong in your management. And it doesn't necessarily mean you. It could mean that you're overworked and you're stuck behind a computer running reports. Like that's not a manager's job, right? That's when when that's happening and you're spending too much time in reports, then that means you need an operations person. So for me, I see training as the classroom side and coaching being the live in the moment one-on-one side. Coaching for me is a lot more one-on-one or maybe even one-on-two reps than I see as training. Coaching can also be one of my favorite ways to coach is after we've done training is have reps make calls, but also have another rep or two sit there to help feedback to the salesperson, right? To say, hey, I loved how you said this. Did you hear this? Because what's going to happen is the people who are not on the sales call, but they're just listening, are going to hear it differently. And they're going to be able to pick up things that the rep wasn't able to hear because they're so focused on having the conversation. So you create a peer-to-peer coaching environment as well as management to rep environment. So I think the peer-to-peer stuff helps. It also aligns you for greater success because you're not always there. You're going to teach the reps how to support themselves and each other, which I think goes towards culture, right? And that comes from you creating that as a leader. So I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'll go on forever.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I didn't read the sorry. This is from David also. The later question that they had is, should managers do the job of a SDR in order to run the process?
Yes. And I also think managers should do the job as a rep, right? And there are two ways leadership, it doesn't even have to be managers, but it can be leadership participates in the sales cycle. One is you can act as that authority figure in the sales cycle so that your customer feels like they're talking to someone who can make more decisions than a sales rep. That's one way. The other way to do it is you actually need to get on the phone and you need to hammer out calls and run some sequences and cadences, from your outreach or sales loft. You need to stay in the trenches with your team in front of your team. You should run contests against your team, meaning, hey, everybody, I'm going to get on the call today. And if I do X, you got to go downstairs and buy me coffee and serve it, like a waiter to me. And likewise, if you win, I'm going to go do it for you, right? Have fun with it. Show them that you're willing to get in the trenches. If you move into management or leadership and expect that you should no longer be in the sales role, then you're the wrong kind of manager. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work anymore these days. I think you get more out of your team and you build a stronger culture when they see you get in the trenches with them.
When they actually see it. So that's interesting because I think most SDR managers, they come up through the ranks, and the first thing that they want to do when they get promoted is never make another cold call again.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that happens everywhere, though. I think that happens if you're an AE moving into management. I think if you move from manager to director or director to VP, that happens. And granted, to some extent, as your role expands, you aren't necessarily supposed to do that because you're supposed to take a higher view. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't put some effort into it, right? Like there's no reason you shouldn't try and let the team know that, hey, you're willing to go take to get punched around a little bit too. It means a lot. And I'll be honest with you, I was the first one to sort of be a manager, I was the first person to happily be a manager and quote unquote lose the contest because it gave your team bragging rights. It didn't mean that they thought they were smarter than you or better than you. It just made them feel good that they beat, for lack of a better word, mom and dad. I got 2 boys, they're 9 and 10. They love to try and arm wrestle me. They never win, but I definitely let them think they're going to win, which gets them excited. And one day, guess what? They are going to win. In fact, they're already beating my butt on the mountain when it comes to snowboarding and skiing. So, it's fun to let them have that because it actually encourages their growth mindset. It shows them that they can accomplish things. It shows them they can set a goal that may have been harder to think about doing, and they've achieved it. So I think there's value as a manager or a leader to let the other team win, right? And it's not because, on the flip side, I was also the guy who went on the golf course and never let my boss win, even though that's what I was supposed to let people do. It's like, why would I, they didn't hire me to do that, right? So,
nice. Well, actually, and
a little counterintuitive on that end of it.
No, I love it. I mean, you got to lead from the front, and there's that graphic that you see sometimes on Instagram that's like a bunch of people pulling along the manager in the back, yes. And it says the manager's in the back, and then it's like leaders are up at the front, And
yes.
If you start reading, biographies and stuff, especially George Washington. I mean, George Washington was always up there at the front, like with the troops, like trying to get them better, like food and clothes and latrines and stuff like that. Yeah. They loved the guy because he was right in there doing the job with them. And I think we tend to, get away from that big time. And
I told you, I just read the new biography on Ulysses Grant, and the same thing. No matter what you think of him as a president, but as a general and a soldier, he was very forward thinking. He did come from sort of a Missouri background, but was, very anti-slavery and thought it was, killing the country. But he also led on the battlefield a lot. Like he definitely did not sort of hide behind the troops. So I agree with that.
He
with
was
your
right
comment.
In there. And so I got one more. It could be the same, Ashley. I guess people are pretty shy today. They're getting away from it. But this is kind of ironic because I got one more text that just came in, Richard, and it said, the process set up by my manager is not working. Nobody follows it. What should we do? So I'm assuming that this isn't the same Ashley, but this is an SDR. I'm assuming it's an SDR. Hey, you guys should just call in. It's a lot easier.
Well, I can appreciate that Ashley doesn't want to have her voice heard in case her manager's listening. So
That's true.
So we're going to
Richard, what should people do? What should people do out there if they have a process that's set up, but it's not working that great, but it's what their manager wants them to be doing?
Well, I think the process is supposed to be to help drive data-driven decisions, right? Like that is the purpose of having a process. And oftentimes people do this a lot when I'm working with them, is that they think the process, once they create it, is done. What a process really is a hypothesis. And now you need to go and prove or disprove the hypothesis. And so, to Ashley, who's asking the question, I think you need to do some data analysis. I think you need to write out what you think a different process would be, write it out on paper, and write out what you think the outcome of that would be, right? And then, again, approach your manager, maybe in your one-on-one, and just say, hey, look, I know this is the process you created. Here's what I'm noticing, and I at least have a suggestion that maybe it's something we should try. Right? Don't tell him it's not working. Don't tell him he made the wrong decision. Nobody wants to be told that, right? Like nobody wants, and certainly, unfortunately, sales leaders have huge egos. So being able to go up to him or her and say, hey, here's the process. Here's what, a couple of reps and I have noticed that we're not sure it's working as well as it should. But on the flip side, here's what we think we should try to change it to. How would you feel about doing this? And again, part of that process discussion will be, I don't want to go make changes in Salesforce or, the sort of the back end stuff that's required. And that's a legitimate excuse. Like change is hard, right? The pain of change, or what if it's wrong, and all those things matter. But that's not your job as a salesperson. Your job as the salesperson is to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Boss, I've got some feedback for you that I think can help us all get better. And what will happen? You're going to get two things. One, you're going to determine if your boss is willing to give it a shot. And if they are, that's awesome, right? That's fantastic. If they're like, nope, we're going to stick to this. We've already tried that. It doesn't work. Well, good. Now you have an answer for the kind of boss that you have, and you can decide if you want to fucking stay there, right? If you don't like your boss, fucking leave. Like, it'll scare the shit out of them too. Like, that's part of their problem. Reps seem to, particularly in the Bay Area, although not as much in Bay Area, but no matter where you are, people always seem to think that reps should be gracious that they have a job, when in fact it's the other way around. As managers should be gracious that I still show up. Right?
That's true. We've been in a good economy for a long time.
Well, not only that, but even in a bad economy, if I'm a good rep, I'm not scared about finding another job. Right? Like, I was unemployed right in 2007, right when recession hit, and it took me 6 weeks to find a job. It wasn't necessarily the job I wanted, but it was a great job to get me started back to where I needed to be. I didn't want to have a hole in my resume, right? Like, that was my biggest concern, was the hole in my resume, not my compensation. That I can take care of. I'm a sales rep. But anyway, back to Ashley, come with an answer though, not just, hey, this is a problem, right? Try to define it. And it's also going to show that you have leadership skills. It's going to show that you're willing to stand up and stick your neck out. And if they decide to quote unquote, say, no way, Ashley, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. Well, good. Now you have data to let you decide, is the company worth sticking with? Is the boss worth sticking with? Those are two very different things, right? Maybe it's not the right boss, but it's a great company and you want to move to a different department. Go for it, right? Don't worry about your boss.
I mean, I think the main thing too, like looking at it from the boss angle, is, did you bring a solution?
Yes.
Did you do a little bit of homework, or are you just like, this process sucks?
Are you whining?
I'm just going to wing it, even though I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly. That's exactly what I said. That's exactly what I suggest too, is that it's about bringing a solution, not just telling them what the problem is.
Yeah.
So.
No, this is great.
Hope that worked, Ashley.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Richard. So we got a couple more minutes here, and we are out of calls. And so we appreciate everybody writing in, and let's get the calls cranking next time. Yeah. Richard,
but I actually have something we could talk about
on your side. Yeah.
Well, no, this is just something that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, and it's a serious issue, and it's a real issue, and I know people don't like to talk about it in sales, but we're gonna, if you don't mind going deep for 5 minutes, Dave.
Oh, of course. Yeah. What do you got?
Yeah. So I want to talk about mental health and depression. Mental health is probably one of the single greatest things that is avoided at all costs by every sales leader I've ever met, because we're taught to crush it. We're taught to not that any of those issues are weaknesses, right? You can't be sad. You can't be anything other than angry or competitive. And that's just fucking bullshit. So I want to make sure people understand that. And I'm going to tell a very, very personal story. I've written about it. It's public if you haven't read it. There's a group out there now called uncrush.org. It was started by Tim Clark, who was at Salesforce for a while, that talks about, all of us who have been successful, or people who've been successful in different fields, particularly in sales, what we're really struggling with on the inside, right? And Tim has a very compelling story. It's written about, but I'm not going to explain it because I think it's his story to tell. But I'm more than happy to tell mine. Is that I am a lifelong sufferer of depression, not like suicide depression. For lack of a word, I say I'm lucky in that regards. I certainly just have a genuine sense of sadness, but I've also made it my superpower. I know how to use it over time and years to make me stronger. How do I use it to make me stronger? How do I recognize it? And I've done all the things that need to be done. I've done therapy, and I've done medication, and I've done meditation through Headspace. And I have a super strong, amazing spouse who loves me and, supports me. And my boys help me, although they don't know necessarily the details. But since we had a few minutes, I just want to make sure people know that this shit's real. It matters. Please go find my story on Uncrushed. You can find it on my LinkedIn profile as well. And don't ever feel like you're alone. It's one of those things where I don't think people acknowledge it or want to, because they think they're by themselves. And it's, for lack of a better word, considered taboo. Yeah, I have this fun, outgoing, jovial personality. I make a lot of jokes, and I've got my hashtag shit my sales manager used to say. And, all those things are designed to help me be a better me. And yeah, the humor is there to, some cases it hides the pain, but in some cases it also helps me manage the pain. Like I said, I don't think I'm one of these manic people. I don't think I'm one of these people who's like, oh my God, life is terrible. But there's definitely a general sense of pulling down on me that I feel. And I want to let people know that it's important to talk about. You can ping me online separately. I'll never share your name or your story. Had a lot of people already come to me telling me how much they appreciated me talking about it. And I just want to make sure people know that this shit matters, and it really matters in sales, because it's almost, seen as a weakness if you talk about it in sales. And I don't think it should be. I think it's actually your strength, because it does show you're vulnerable, and it shows you have empathy, and it shows you have sympathy, which are all the kinds of things that are required to go back to the very first question a different Ashley asked us, which is, how do you build trust? By acknowledging that you're just a human like everybody else. So I'll sort of stop there with my preaching and teaching. And I don't know if anybody texted or brought a question in, but by all means, there are resources out there for you. There's Uncrushed is certainly one of them. Please ask for help if you feel like you need help. And sometimes just asking for help is to say, hey, thanks for saying that. It made me feel good about myself, and that helps. Like, you're not looking for a magic pill or a magic solution. You just got to take one step at a time. So again, I'll stop there, David, and let you sort of.
I appreciate that. I mean, I've noticed some of the posts coming out by Uncrushed, and I noticed your post, and I just think it's great to be able to talk about this, because I think, social media has really become a blessing and a curse in a way.
Yeah.
This is a big topic, so there's a lot of stuff that we can
everybody
talk
looks perfect on Instagram, don't they?
I honestly, it's a double-edged sword. I think, because for all the good that social media does, and I acknowledge that it does a lot of good, but also, it reminds me of a quote. I can't remember who said it, but it's like, comparing yourself to others and being miserable about that it's a thief of your own joy, because you're spending so much time thinking about, oh man, everybody else out there is doing so much better than me, and it's like, I suck,
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck. I mean, that seems like a byproduct of social media, but that's just one aspect of what you're talking about. I think.
Yeah, and I think I love how you said it. It's a thief of joy. Like, that is so true. And granted, look, we're doing this on a business social media way. Like, we're driving content, through a business site. So you're right. Social media has its ups and downs, but that's good. So
I know. I mean, I'm the first one to say I've benefited tremendously from social media. I mean, I find, podcasts of people who I never would have found, and I learned things constantly. I run a lot of my business off of LinkedIn, just posting stuff and
Me too.
Interacting with people, right? But on the flip side, it's definitely can wheedle its way into your psyche of, dude, everybody is so happy out there. What is wrong with me?
Yeah.
So that's just one thing. But I appreciate you sharing that. And it's interesting because the other thing I was thinking of, there's a lot of variances of mental health, from just sort of someone who's generally got their shit together, but they dip into depression every once in a while, like everybody does. And then on the flip side, you've got people who are like screaming at themselves on Market Street, just throwing like crap at everybody who walks around. I mean, there's this huge spectrum.
There's a big gray area between mental health and mental illness, right?
Yeah.
For me, for whatever reason in my head, I don't think I'm mentally ill, but I do think I need my mental health taken care of. I certainly have no desire to go buy a gun. I don't need those kinds of things in my life, but if other people feel like they want them, that's fine. But I do think there should be, I don't know the right way, but some kind of reasonable check and balance. But it's tough, and it should be acknowledged, right? Mental health doesn't mean you're mentally ill. It means you just want to have a healthy mind. Like, that's it. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. So
and I think it's if you're starting from a place where you're just kind of, you can function and you're generally doing okay, then I think that there's a lot of stuff that you can do yourself to try to help you. Like you mentioned Headspace, which is a great app. I use it too to try to meditate, because I could never fucking meditate. I mean, it was
I totally agree.
Until I got Headspace, and I think the physical aspect is huge, like getting out there and getting some sun and getting some exercise and eating right and stuff like that. That all kind of can help. But there's also a certain point where if none of that stuff is helping and you're still like really grappling with it, then you gotta look to external resources.
Yeah, ask for help, and it can be a friend. It doesn't have to be a doctor. It could be a friend. So it could be. I don't mind answering people's questions about this stuff. I'm an open book, clearly, about it. So and
I would say, not to change the subject, but we're up against the time here, and this is we should do another show called the mental health, in sales. And
I totally agree.
Just dive into it. And I'm also thinking at the Surf and Sales conference, which is coming up again, that you guys have a breakout session on this very topic. If you don't,
we've talked about it.
Yeah,
we are talking about doing that. Yeah, we haven't announced the third one, but it's coming up soon. It'll be coming up at the end of the summer. If you want to know about surf and sales and head to Costa Rica, send me an email. I'll let you know about it. So
I mean, and not to be completely glib, but God, I know for one, if my mental health was starting to go downhill, going down to Costa Rica with a bunch of really cool people and surfing and learning about this kind of shit, I think that would help a lot. So.
Which also brings me, hey, David, what is the status of the sales development conference?
Oh, my God.
For San Francisco.
Speaking of mental health.
Yeah.
So sales development conference, thank you. It's August 23rd in San Francisco. We are in full sales development conference mode right now. So we're getting the agenda posted. We got a bunch of sponsors, and it's the place to be for sales development professionals, one day under one roof and in SF. And this year it's on a Friday, so nobody works really on Friday anyway. So come to the conference and meet all the players. Stay for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. Awesome.
All right, Richard. Well, thanks for jumping on the sales development call-in show. We got a couple of calls. We got some texts, and really appreciate all the feedback and knowledge. And we'll see you on the next show.
Sounds good. Thanks, David.